work with some ratios, except this time we're going to work with our percents, and in particular, percent of change. So to find a percent something changes, it's really the ratio of the change to the original. Or I always like to think of it as change over original. And to find out how something changes, how numbers change, I just subtract them, and we're going to get into that. And I always put change over the original. And then we'll talk about how to find the percent from that, because we're going to get a decimal and change a decimal into a percent. So we're going back to things that we know previously, and we're going to use those to find a percent of change. And then also we're going to need to tell if it's a percent of increase or a percent of decrease. And that's pretty straightforward. If you went up, it's an increase. If you went down, it's a decrease. Determine whether each percent of change is a percent of increase or a percent of decrease. Then find the percent of change. Okay, we're actually going to do the increase and decrease part at the very end after we get our percent, so it makes a little more sense. And then one thing we have to know is that we're always taking the change over the original. Change over the original every single time. So let's look at the first one. To find the change, we just subtract them, right? To figure out how much it changed. So it went from 32 to 40. So it changed by 8, didn't it? And the original, we said it's 32. So it's really 8 over 32. There's my change over original. And if I would take that onto a calculator, I would get, just take 8 divided by 32. I get 0.25. So what percent is 0.25? Well, if you remember back a couple of years ago, changing a decimal to a percent, you need to move your decimal 2 times to the right because you're really multiplying by 100 to get to a percentage. So it's really 25%. And if we look from the original to the new, it went up, didn't it? It went up, so we say a 25% increase. 25% increase. Look at number 2. Same thing, put the change over the original. So to find the change, I subtract the 2. It doesn't matter which one you put first, positive or negative. We're always going to have a positive. And then put it over the original. So change over the original. Well, it changed 16. The original is 20. And if I take 16 divided by 20, I get 0.8. And like we said before, we move our decimal 2 places to the right to find the percent. So 1, 2. So that means I need to add a 0 in there. So we say 80%, and it went from 20 to 4, so it went down now. So we say an 80% decrease. 80% decrease. So pretty straightforward. Just do the change over the original and change your decimal to a percent. With the story problem, we gotta read carefully to see what we're actually trying to do here. So the price a used bookstore pays to buy a book is $5. The store sells the book for 28% above the price that it pays for the book. What is the selling price of the book? So basically, they buy a book that's $5. They add on 28% of $5 to get its selling price, right? To get the selling price. So I'm going to start with my $5. And I want to add on that 28% of $5. Well, how do I take 28% of 5? Whenever I want to take a percent of a number, I change the percent to a decimal. So now I go opposite. I move it 2 to the left. So I change it to a decimal. And the of always means I'm going to multiply. So I change 28% to 0.28 and I multiply it by 5. In which case I get 1.4. So I'm going to add on that $1.40. That's 28% of $5. They add that on. They add that 28% on. And when I add those two up, I get 6.4. I want to add the 0 because I'm talking about money. And there we go. That would be the selling price of the book. So really we're just looking at 28% of 5. And we want to add that on because we're selling it at a higher price, above that price that it pays for. So anytime you want a percent of a number, multiply. Change to a decimal and multiply. Okay, we're going to use that same theory here, except we might do something a little different. So a printer is on sale for 25% off the original price. If the original price of the toy is $60, what is the discounted price after a 6.75% sales tax? Well, let's just start from the beginning. We got an original price of a toy that's $60. $60. Well, I get the discount before it gets tax put on it, right? I get the discount before it gets tax put on it. So I want to take off 25%. So we're going to take away 25% of 60. Well, I got to find 25% of 60, which we just talked about, change to a decimal, so 0.25, and multiply. Or really a fourth of 60, isn't it? And when I do that, I end up with 15. So here's my discount, a $15 discount. Well, I got to take that away from my original cost. So now I'm sitting at $45. Well, now I can add on that sales tax. Add on that 6.75% sales tax. So what do we have to do? We have to find 6.75% of 45 and add that on. So change to a decimal. So now moving 2 to the left. So it's really 0.0675. Don't forget that 0 there. Times 45, right? Change to a decimal and multiply. So 0.0675 times 45, which gives us $3. Well, it's really 3.0375, but we're working with money, so we want to round to the nearest hundred. So 3.04, I should round up, because that 7 tells me to round up. So I got to add on that tax now. So let's add on $3.04 for a total cost of $48.04. So take the discount first before the sales tax. But remember, discount you got to subtract, sales tax you got to add on. Deuces.